trying to reach out to Starboard. What kind of response are you getting?
None. Starboard wants the letter to speak for itself, and that's fine, because if you're going to send a shot across the bow like this one, you probably want to wait to see what kind of response you get from Yahoo's board before you decide to go nuclear and announce a proxy fight.
Now, in terms of what's next, Fabio, what can you tell us about Starboard value? What is their usual MO in approaching a company?
They are, more than most funds, really focused on management changes. They're not interested. They don't have a track record of the large dividend. They don't have a track record of. They want to see structural changes at the firm. But it's important to note that they only hold about 0.75, less than 1%. Of the outstanding shares. So they need people to come aboard. But the reality is, in terms of what's next, the entire board comes up for re-election this summer. This is the first shot on its way towards a proxy fight.
And just to speak to your point, if you come inside the Bloomberg terminal here, this is the HTS function, which allows us to see the security ownership of a company. For Yahoo, as you mentioned, Fabio, Starboard doesn't have a huge stake. They're actually number 26 on the list of big investors.
Not on the first screen.
Not on the first screen. But if you look at...
But that doesn't always matter.
It doesn't, because if you look at how many shares they've added recently, for instance, you could see that Starboard has added 3.5 million shares as of the filing in late September. My question to you, Scott Galloway, is if they get what they want and get new leadership, how does that even begin to address some of the more fundamental problems the company faces, including its treatment of taxes?
Well, new leadership is a proxy, I think, for selling the core assets. I think these guys want a structural change. And by the way, I hate to agree with anyone from Colombia, but I think you're...
That could happen in the, in dire situations.
Only here, right? But I think something's about to happen here. And the narrative is about to switch from complaining about Marissa Mayer, because it's now everyone's just piling on. Now it's going to be a narrative about the board.
I just want to address the point that Fabio made about skin in the game, right? It's important. Clearly, the larger a stake you have, the greater a voice you have in the proceedings, but it's not required. It helps if you're Carl Icahn and you've got a 13.5% position in Cheniere, for example, or you're Dan Loeb, or you're Bill Ackman, all of whom like to take large stakes in companies because they know they're going to get heard. But look here, Carl Icahn had less than 1% of eBay when he started his proxy contest there.
Look what he got done.
Jana has less than 2% of Qualcomm and did what it initiated a strategic review last summer. And Trian had less than 3% of DuPont and was able to wage a proxy contest, which it lost, but which ultimately resulted in Ellen Kullman leaving the company. So you don't need a lot of skin to make things happen.
I hear you, Eric, and there is, the big stick theory, but there is the other reality, which is that, Mason Capital is the largest hedge fund that holds them, at least due to the latest filings, and they've lost about 40% of their assets. There's been a substantial rotation out of event-driven and out of activists. Mason was down double digits earlier and has had another rough year. So they're down substantially, and frankly, Starboard has also seen asset withdrawals and weak runs as well. So to some degree, there is more of an element of a chance to say you and whose army. But the truth is that this is a situation where I think it makes a lot of sense. The market cap of this company is $31 billion, right? And if you take these three things together, $30 billion, their ownership of Alibaba is like $29 billion. And the third component of that is Silicon Valley is about attracting talented people to work for you. Whatever anyone does is an irrelevancy to the stock price of Yahoo. No one with Yahoo on his business card makes any damn difference to the value of the stock.
It's all rooted in Alibaba, isn't it?
This is just Two and a Half Men or The Days of Our Lives. This soap opera's gone on way too long. This thing needs a structural shift. I've run activist campaigns before. This is what is going on right now. Starboard's not talking to Eric Schatzker, but they're talking to the other 25 shareholders that are larger than them and saying, hey, we're frustrated, are you? And the moment that gets a little bit above 5%, they're probably going to file a D and say, we're thinking about a proxy fight. If everyone is smart, they'll get around a table and say, how do we... The quickest way to silence an activist is to put him or her on your board, because then they can't say anything. The fear for shareholders here is that Yahoo boards turns into the kind of defensive old white guy, no one tells me what to do posture, and says we're not doing anything that anyone tries to tell us what to do.
The one thing that everybody seems to agree with, and I'm pretty sure you're in the same camp, Scott, having discussed this with you before, is that Marissa Mayer has to go, right? That's what Starboard wants. They want a change in leadership. They want a change on the board. Other investors, including Eric Jackson, small investor at Spring Owl, but who's good for
Great
a
deck.
99-page
Great
deck,
deck.
thinks that there has to be a change in leadership and at the board. And that is the demand that that Yahoo probably has to answer.
So a leadership that would be accommodating to these activist investors who are looking for a sale.
Who have different opinions, though. No, not all, right? These guys think that the core business, Spring Owl thinks the core business can be fixed. Starboard thinks that it has to be jettisoned.
I think it's moved beyond leadership at this point. I'm sorry if I
No,
didn't
please.
interrupt you. I think this is literally like, this is over. It's time to sell or spin. And if we need new leadership and a new board, fine.
And I would bet that they will, in fact, spin off the, by spinning off the internet assets, all you're left with is a shell that holds Alibaba.
Yeah.
Everything is clear. Internet people can do what they do. And Canyon has just filed an HSR on this as well, by the way. And that's important because there could be more people getting more seriously involved.